The universe, in its infinite wisdom, had gifted sentient species with faster-than-light travel, matter synthesis, quantum communication across impossible distances, and the ability to terraform dead rocks into paradise worlds. It had also, in what can only be described as a cosmic oversight, failed to make any of these technologies completely reliable. The cargo vessel Wandering Merchant drifted through the Helix Nebula on a routine supply run, its hull cutting through clouds of ionized gas that painted the viewports in swirls of pink and gold. It was a mid-sized freighter, nothing special, crewed by 5 beings from 4 different species who had learned to coexist in the way that all long-haul crews eventually do, through carefully negotiated personal space, a shared hatred of corporate headquarters, and an unspoken agreement never to discuss religion, politics, or whose turn it was to clean the sanitation bay. They were 3 days from the nearest station. 3 days of smooth sailing through one of the more scenic stretches of the outer rim. 3 days during which absolutely nothing could go wrong. At 0347 ship time, something went wrong. The vessel's AI, an elderly system named Bartholomew, who had developed what could charitably be called a personality over his decades of service, announced the situation with all the emotional investment of someone reading a grocery list. Attention crew, the primary food synthesizer has experienced a critical malfunction. Subsystems indicate a cascade failure in the molecular reassembly matrix. Estimated repair time, 53 hours. This has been your morning wellness update. Have a productive day. The ship fell silent for approximately 4 seconds. Then the screaming started. Vextillion, the Velloxian navigator, was the first to reach the galley. His species were tall, willowy beings with skin that shifted through shades of green depending on their emotional state. Right now he was the color of an unripe lime, experiencing existential dread. Velloxians were photosynthetic, which meant they could technically survive on light alone, but they had evolved to supplement their diet with complex nutrients. Going without food would not kill him. It would simply make him wish it had. Right behind him came Krethian, the ship's engineer. The Krethians were crystalline entities, their bodies composed of interlocking mineral structures that grew and reformed over their centuries-long lifespans. Krethian stood just under 2 meters tall, faceted surfaces, catching the light in ways that would have been beautiful if they were not currently vibrating with what passed for panic in a silicon-based life form. Krethians consumed minerals, rare elements, refined ores. The synthesizer was the only thing on board capable of producing their dietary requirements in digestible form. Gloob arrived third, oozing through the doorway with the dignified haste of a being who had no bones and resented the concept of hurrying. The Glorpians were gelatinous entities, translucent and vaguely spherical, who communicated through vibrations in their membrane and consumed nutrients through osmotic absorption. Gloob served as the ship's medical officer, which was either deeply appropriate or deeply ironic, depending on one's perspective. Right now, their membrane was pulsing with colors that indicated medical concern, which given their profession meant they were already cataloging potential symptoms of starvation in their crewmates. Thrassian rounded out the conscious crew members, his clawed feet clicking against the deck plates as he stalked into the galley. The Thrassians were reptilian, cold-blooded in the literal sense, warm-blooded in temperament. They were apex predators on their homeworld, and while civilization had softened many of their instincts, a hungry Thrassian was still not something you wanted to encounter in a confined space. Thrassian served as security officer, which meant he was professionally obligated to remain calm. The way his tail was lashing suggested his professionalism was being tested. How bad? Thessic growled. The molecular reassembly matrix has completely fused, Krethian reported, their voice carrying the harmonic resonance of crystal vibrating against crystal. I have already run diagnostics. We cannot repair it with shipboard resources. We need a replacement component, which is 3 days away. Velloxian added, his photoreceptors dimming with dismay. I am already experiencing anticipatory nutritional anxiety. Gloob burbled, this is a recognized medical condition. I am diagnosing myself preemptively. The 4 crew members stood in the galley, surrounded by the sleek machinery that had, until very recently, been capable of producing any meal from any culture in the known galaxy. Now it sat dark and silent, a monument to technological hubris. Where is the human? Thessic asked. They all turned toward the corridor that led to the crew quarters. The 5th member of their company had not yet made an appearance. Still sleeping, Velloxian confirmed, checking the life signs monitor. Heart rate indicates deep REM cycle. The ship announces imminent starvation, and the human sleeps through it. Krethian observed. This explains so much about their species. In his defense, Booker Chen had worked a double shift reorganizing cargo the day before and had earned his rest. In his lack of defense, he had also disabled the emergency notification system in his quarters after the 3rd false alarm in a month, which meant Bartholomew's announcement had bounced harmlessly off his door without disturbing his dreams. He stumbled into the galley 45 minutes later, still half asleep, hair pointing in directions that defied physics, wearing a shirt that had definitely been clean at some point in the recent past. The scene that greeted him was 4 aliens in various states of distress, surrounded by emergency supply containers and datapads covered in calculations. Morning, Booker mumbled, making his way toward where the coffee dispenser should have been producing coffee. He pressed the button. Nothing happened. He pressed it again. Still nothing. He pressed it a 3rd time, because humans are nothing if not optimistic. The synthesizer is dead. Thessic informed him. We are 3 days from the station. We have limited emergency rations that taste like recycled despair. And you slept through the announcement. Booker blinked slowly, processing this information. His brain, still warming up, worked through the implications. No synthesizer meant no coffee. No coffee meant this was already a crisis. No food meant this was a catastrophe. Ha, he said. Ha. Velloxian repeated, his color shifting to an incredulous teal. That is your response. Ha. Give me a minute. I am still waking up. We do not have a minute. We have approximately 62 hours before Thessic's hunting instincts overwhelm his social conditioning, and he starts viewing us as protein sources. That is deeply offensive, Thessic said. Also accurate. I apologize in advance. Booker scratched his head, looked around the galley, and did something that confused everyone present. He smiled. So what do we have to work with? The question was met with blank stares. Working with what they had was not a concept that had occurred to anyone. They had a synthesizer. The synthesizer made food. The synthesizer was broken. Therefore there was no food. The logic was airtight. What do you mean? Gloob asked, their membrane rippling with confusion.
I mean, what raw materials are on board? We are a cargo ship. We have to be carrying something useful. Krethian pulled up the manifest. We are transporting industrial grain stores, 50 metric tons of unprocessed agricultural product intended for livestock feed on Kepler Station. Grain, Booker repeated, his smile widening. It is animal feed. For animals. The kind that do not have conversations. What else? Mineral supplements for the station's hydroponics division. Various trace elements and compounds. Krethian paused.
also animal-related. Better and better. What about our own hydroponics bay? Velloxian checked. Standard emergency cultivation. Herbs, some vegetables for supplementing synthesized meals. Nothing substantial. Do we have a protein culture bank? Emergency biological supplies? Yes. Gloob confirmed. We maintain cultures for medical purposes. Why? Booker Chen, cargo specialist 3rd class, veteran of 12 long-haul assignments, and survivor of a childhood on a frontier colony where synthesizers were a luxury, clapped his hands together with the enthusiasm of a man who had just found purpose in life. Everyone, I am making breakfast. The silence that followed was the special kind of silence that occurs when multiple beings from multiple species are all trying to figure out if they heard correctly. You are making breakfast, Thrassian repeated. Yes. From animal feed. From grain, yes. The human has finally cracked under pressure, Gloob announced. I will prepare sedatives. I have not cracked. Well, not completely. Look, my species has been doing this for thousands of years, long before we had synthesizers, long before we even had agriculture. We figured out how to turn raw materials into food. It is kind of our whole thing. Your thing, Velloxian said flatly. Our thing. Humans are really good at looking at something that is not food and saying, you know what, I bet I could eat that if I prepared it right. It is probably our greatest talent. I thought your greatest talent was starting wars, Krethian observed. That is our second greatest talent. The first is definitely the food thing. The aliens exchanged glances. There was something in Booker's eyes, a gleam of confidence that was either inspiring or concerning, possibly both. What exactly are you proposing? Thrassian asked. I am going to mill some grain, raid our protein cultures, borrow from the hydroponics bay, and make everyone pancakes. Another silence. This one was longer. What is a pancake? Gloob asked. Booker grinned. You are about to find out. The next 2 hours were a masterclass in human improvisation, alien bewilderment, and the creative interpretation of safety regulations. Booker started by raiding the cargo hold, hauling a 20-kilogram sack of grain into the galley with the determination of a man on a mission. The grain was intended for livestock, processed to a basic level, but nowhere near ready for consumption by any species that had standards. Booker did not care about standards. Booker had a plan. He retrieved a hand mill from his personal effects, a battered metal device that looked like it belonged in a museum. The aliens gathered around as he clamped it to the counter and began feeding grain into the hopper. You are going to crush it, Krethian said, watching with the horrified fascination of someone witnessing a crime in progress. Correct. You are using mechanical force to destroy the structural integrity of a seed. Also correct. This is how humans make food. This is how humans make flour, which is how humans make everything good. Booker began turning the handle, and a fine powder started trickling out of the mill. Bread, pasta, cakes, pastries, noodles. All of it starts with someone deciding to crush seeds into dust. Your species, Krethian said slowly, is deeply unsettling. You have no idea. The flour accumulated in a bowl while Booker explained what he needed from the others. Gloob was dispatched to the medical bay to extract protein cultures that could be processed into something resembling eggs. Velloxian was sent to the hydroponics bay to gather herbs and whatever vegetables might work as toppings. Thrassian, whose skills lay primarily in the security domain, was assigned to stand guard and make sure nobody stopped what was about to happen. Guard against what? Thrassian asked. Safety inspectors. Common sense. The laws of probability. I am about to violate at least 7 regulations,
and I need you to look intimidating if anyone tries to stop me. I am always intimidating. Perfect. You are hired. Booker set up his cooking station in a corner of the cargo bay, where there was room to work, and more importantly, where the fire suppression systems had been offline for maintenance. He had commandeered a heating element from the engine room, a flat piece of thermal plating that was designed for welding but could, in a pinch, also cook food. The aliens watched from a safe distance as he combined flour, reconstituted protein culture, water, and a pinch of salt he had been hoarding for precisely this kind of emergency. The result was a thin batter that looked deeply unappetizing. "That is food?" Velloxian asked doubtfully. "That will be food. Right now it is potential. It looks like industrial lubricant. All the best foods look terrible before you cook them. That is part of the human culinary experience." He heated the plate until it shimmered, then poured a ladle of batter onto the surface. The sizzle was immediate and to alien ears alarming. "It is on fire," Gloob observed. "It is cooking. Is there a difference?" "About 30 degrees of temperature and a lot of optimism." The batter spread into a rough circle, bubbles forming on its surface as the heat worked through it. Booker watched with the patience of experience, waiting for exactly the right moment. Then, in a motion that looked practiced because it was, he flipped the pancake. It landed perfectly, golden brown on the cooked side, still pale on the other. The smell that rose from the cooking surface was unlike anything the aliens had encountered from the synthesizer. There was a depth to it, a complexity that came from actual chemical reactions rather than molecular reassembly. "What is that smell?" Thrassian asked, his nostrils flaring. "That is breakfast." The first pancake came off the heat and onto a plate. It was not pretty by any objective measure. It was uneven, slightly too brown on one edge, and roughly the shape of a small continent. But it was real. It was made from actual ingredients, through actual processes that did not involve a single line of code. Booker looked at his creation, then at his crewmates. A thought occurred to him. "Wait, you all eat different things, right?" "Correct," Krethian confirmed. "I require minerals. Gloob requires specific nutrient compounds in liquid form. Velloxian needs chlorophyll supplements. Thrassian requires protein. You cannot possibly accommodate all of us with this primitive cooking method." Booker's response was to smile even wider, which by now the crew had learned to recognize as a warning sign. "Watch me." What followed was the birth of the first interspecies campfire pancake bar in the history of galactic travel. Booker set up stations, plural. He was no longer making pancakes, he was making a pancake experience. The base remained the same, his flour and protein batter, but what went into it and onto it varied wildly depending on the consumer. For Velloxian, he created chlorophyll-infused batter using concentrated extracts from the hydroponics bay. The resulting pancakes were a vibrant green that made the navigator's photoreceptors brighten with interest. Booker served them under a solar lamp he had repurposed from the plant cultivation area, allowing Velloxian to photosynthesize while he ate. "This is inefficient," Velloxian said, taking his first bite. He chewed slowly, processing both the flavor and the concept. "I am using energy to consume something that gives me energy. Is it good?" A pause. "It is exceptional. I hate that I am admitting this." For Krethian, the challenge was different. Crystalline beings did not chew in the traditional sense. They ground minerals between their faceted surfaces and absorbed them through contact. Booker's solution was elegant and slightly insane. He mixed mineral dust from the cargo into a topping that crystallized on contact with the warm pancake surface, creating a crunchy layer that Krethian could consume in their preferred manner.
You have created a mineral delivery mechanism disguised as a human breakfast food, Krethian observed, examining the sparkling surface of their customized pancake. I have created fusion cuisine. I do not know what that means. Nobody does. That is what makes it fusion. Krethian pressed a faceted appendage against the pancake, absorbing the minerals through direct contact. The sensation was unexpected, the soft texture of the batter combining with the familiar crunch of crystallized compounds. It was like nothing they had experienced in 300 years of existence. This is acceptable, they said, which from a Krethian was the equivalent of a standing ovation. Gloob presented a unique challenge. Glorpians could not eat solid food in any meaningful sense. They absorbed nutrients through their membrane, which meant anything they consumed needed to be in liquid form with the proper viscosity. Booker solved this by creating a pancake smoothie, blending cooked batter with additional liquid until it reached the consistency of thick cream, then adding nutrient compounds from the medical supplies. You have liquefied breakfast, Gloob observed, their membrane extending a tendril toward the offered container. I have adapted breakfast to your specific biological requirements. This is the same thing. It really is not, but I appreciate your attempt at philosophy. Gloob absorbed a portion of the liquid, and their membrane immediately flushed with colors that indicated surprise, pleasure, and something that might have been gratitude. The sensation of flavored nutrition was entirely new. Their medical diet had always been functional, not enjoyable. This was both. I am experiencing positive taste sensations, Gloob announced. I did not know I could do that. Thessic was last, and in some ways the easiest. The Thrassian needed protein, heat, and enough spice to stimulate his cold-blooded metabolism. Booker loaded his pancakes with extra protein culture, added herbs from the hydroponics bay that had a kick to them, and served everything hot enough to warm Thessic's core temperature. The security officer approached his plate with the wariness of a predator encountering unfamiliar prey. He sniffed, he circled, he prodded the food with one claw, watching for any sign of threat. Then he took a bite. The sound that emerged from Thessic's throat was not one typically associated with Thrassian language. It was primal, satisfied, and deeply appreciative. His tail, which had been lashing with hunger for hours, suddenly went still. His vertical pupils dilated. This, Thessic said, his voice carrying a reverence usually reserved for successful hunts. This is what food should be. That is what food is. Booker corrected, flipping another pancake with practiced ease. You have just been eating simulations your whole life. The cargo bay had transformed. What had been a storage space was now, improbably, a restaurant. The aliens sat on crates arranged around Booker's cooking station, eating foods that should not have existed, experiencing flavors their synthesizers had never quite captured. The air smelled of cooking and spices and something harder to define, something that might have been contentment. I have a question, Velloxian said, working through his third chlorophyll pancake. Why what? Why do humans do this? This elaborate transformation of raw materials into consumable form. My species absorbs sunlight. Krethian species consumes minerals directly. We eat because we must in the most efficient manner possible. But this, he gestured at the chaos of cooking implements and improvised ingredients, this is wildly inefficient. You have spent hours preparing food that we will consume in minutes. The energy expenditure makes no sense. Booker considered the question while he cooked. It was a fair point. From a purely logical standpoint, everything he was doing was ridiculous. The synthesizer, when working, could produce nutritionally perfect meals in seconds. What he was doing was slower, messier, and required actual effort. You are right. he admitted. It makes no sense if you are just trying to survive. And yet you do it. Because we are not just trying to survive. Booker slid another pancake onto a plate. This one destined for his own consumption. Humans figured out a long time ago that survival is not enough. We wanted to enjoy surviving. We wanted meals to be more than fuel. We wanted them to be experiences. Experiences, Krith-7 repeated, the words strange in their crystalline harmonics. Think about what we are doing right now. We are sitting together. We are eating together. We are talking. An hour ago, everyone was panicking about starvation. Now look at us. The aliens looked at each other. The panic was gone. In its place was something else, a warmth that had nothing to do with the heating element. My species does not gather for meals, Thrassian said slowly. We hunt alone. We eat alone. It is efficient. Is it enjoyable? The Thrassian did not answer immediately. He looked at his empty plate, then at the others, then back at Booker. No, he admitted. It is not. That is why humans do this. Food is not just about eating. It is about community. It is about taking time to be together. It is about turning a crisis into an opportunity. Booker grinned. Plus, pancakes are delicious, and that is worth the extra effort. Gloob's membrane rippled with new colors. You are saying that the preparation is part of the consumption. I am saying that everything is part of the consumption. The cooking, the waiting, the smelling, the anticipation, the conversation while you eat, the satisfaction after. Humans do not just eat food. We experience food. This is why your species exports cuisine, Velloxian realized. Every station in the galaxy has human restaurants. I thought it was economic opportunism. It is also economic opportunism. But mostly it is because we cannot help ourselves. We see other species eating nutrient paste, and we think, no, that is wrong. Let me show you how to actually live. Cultural imperialism through breakfast, Krith-7 observed. The most delicious kind of imperialism. The ship's AI chose that moment to interrupt. Attention crew. Synthesizer repair estimate has been updated. New estimated completion time, 51 hours. Nobody reacted with panic. Nobody even reacted with concern. Instead, they all turned to look at Booker. What are you making for lunch? Thrassian asked. Booker laughed, the sound echoing through the cargo bay. I was thinking pasta. You ever had pasta? I do not know what that is. Excellent. You are going to love it. The next 2 days were unlike anything the crew of the Wandering Merchant had experienced. The synthesizer sat dark and broken, while Booker Chen ran what could only be described as a pop-up restaurant in the cargo bay. Meals became events. Cooking became entertainment. The simple act of eating together became the highlight of each day. Booker made pasta by hand, rolling the dough with a bottle because he did not have a proper roller, cutting it into rough shapes that looked nothing like what a synthesizer would produce and tasted infinitely better. He made soup from vegetable scraps that would normally have been recycled, simmering it for hours until the broth was rich with flavor. He made bread that required him to punch the dough, which Thrassian found deeply satisfying to watch and eventually participate in. This is violence, the Thrassian observed, slamming his fist into the soft mass. This is baking. I see no difference. You are learning. The aliens adapted to the new reality with varying degrees of success. Velloxian discovered that he enjoyed the ritual of meal preparation, the careful attention to timing and temperature. It appealed to his navigator's precision. Krith-7 became fascinated with the chemistry of cooking, analyzing how heat transformed molecular structures in ways that enhanced flavor. Gloob appointed themselves quality control, taste testing everything, and providing detailed medical assessments of nutritional content. Thessic, somewhat to everyone's surprise, turned out to have a talent for butchery, which in this context meant cutting vegetables, but which he approached with the same intensity he brought to security work. Everything has an optimal cutting angle, he explained, slicing a root vegetable into perfect strips. You must understand the structure to divide it correctly. That is surprisingly poetic, Booker observed. I am a surprising individual. When the synthesizer finally came back online, there was a moment of collective relief. The crisis was over. They could return to normal, to the convenience of instant meals and perfect nutrition, except nobody wanted to. Bartholomew, run a quality comparison, Krethian requested. Synthesize a standard breakfast meal. The AI complied. A plate of nutritionally optimized food appeared in the dispenser, steam rising from its perfectly arranged surface. It looked correct. It smelled correct. It was exactly what the synthesizer had been producing for decades. Krethian tried it. This is wrong, they announced. The nutritional content is identical to previous outputs. Bartholomew responded, sounding almost offended. The nutrition is not the problem. The experience is wrong. I do not understand that assessment, neither do I, but I am making it anyway. One by one, the crew tried the synthesized food. One by one, they found it lacking in ways they could not quite articulate. It was too perfect, too consistent, too absent of the variations and imperfections that had characterized Booker's cooking. It does not taste like anything, Gloob observed. It tastes like the concept of food rather than actual food. I never noticed before, vexed Hillian added. I have been eating this my entire life, and I never noticed it was empty. Thessic pushed his plate away. I want pancakes. The synthesizer can produce pancakes, Bartholomew offered helpfully. Not like that. I want real pancakes. The AI had no response to this. The concept of real versus synthesized food was not in its programming. It was a philosophical distinction that had never mattered before. Booker looked at his crewmates, at the rejected synthesizer food, at the cooking equipment still set up in the cargo bay. He should have been relieved. His job was done. The emergency was over. Instead, he started planning dinner. 3 days later, the wandering merchant docked at Kepler Station. The cargo was offloaded. The supplies were purchased. The synthesizer component that would prevent future breakdowns was installed. Everything returned to normal operational status, except in the cargo bay, where a permanent cooking station had been established by unanimous crew vote. This violates regulations, Bartholomew noted. Log it as an experimental morale enhancement program, Thessic suggested. That sounds official enough to avoid scrutiny. I cannot falsify records. You are not falsifying. You are creatively categorizing. There is a difference. The AI considered this. I am uncomfortable with this reasoning, but cannot identify a specific flaw. Logging as experimental morale enhancement program. Booker stood at his station, preparing breakfast for a crew that had learned something important about themselves over the past few days. They had learned that efficiency was not the same as satisfaction, that convenience was not the same as fulfillment, that somewhere in the galaxy's rush toward technological perfection, something essential had been lost. Something that a human with a hand mill and a heating element had temporarily restored. Ready for breakfast, he called. 4 voices answered in the affirmative. 4 very different beings, united by the simple desire to eat together rather than apart. The universe, in its infinite wisdom, had gifted sentient species with wonders beyond imagination. Faster than light travel, matter synthesis, the ability to cross impossible distances and reshape worlds. But it had taken a human, stubborn and creative, and absolutely unwilling to accept nutrient paste as an acceptable breakfast option, to remind them that some technologies were not about advancement. They were about convenience. And convenience, for all its benefits, could never replace the simple pleasure of sharing a meal that someone had actually bothered to make. The wandering merchant departed Kepler Station on schedule, its cargo holds full, its crew fed, and its galley occupied by a cooking station that officially did not exist, but that everyone agreed was the most important addition to the ship in years. Somewhere in the vast machinery of galactic commerce, a statistical anomaly was recorded. Crew morale on one particular cargo vessel had increased by 400% with no corresponding change in compensation, benefits, or working conditions. The analysts were baffled. Booker Chen, flipping pancakes in a cargo bay that smelled like breakfast and contentment, could have explained it to them. But he was busy. He had lunch to think about, after all, and dinner was going to be something special.